We're now joined via Zoom by the CEO of the South African Liquor Brand Owners Association, SALBA, Mr. Kurt Moore. Mr. Moore, thank you so much for your time. Now, the National Liquor Traders Association has written to President Cyril Ramaphosa for a partial lifting of the alcohol sales ban. Now, I know as SALBA, you've asked for a tax break as a result of the alcohol sales ban. This is a third tax deferment request. What's been the response from SARS and government at large?
Nati, thank you very much for having me on your show. And I think before we get to the tax deferment issue you raised, we've also made submissions to government to consider not extending level 4 of the restrictions. We are aligned with our partners in the Taverners Association, as well as with restaurants and with the tourism sector, that we can't continue like this. There will be significant job losses, and many of those businesses which close will not be opened again. And so it's with that in mind, we've also requested government to grant us a tax concession or deferment of excise tax. By our estimates, we pay about 2.5 billion rand per month to SARS in excise tax. Now, excise tax is a little bit technical. You have to pay the tax even before the product is sold. So even though we're not selling now, tax may be due during this period, and it's within that context that we asked government to consider an excise deferment, and we're hopeful that they will consider that.
Now, earlier, just before we saw this lockdown that we're currently in, as well as the ban, you had indicated or projected that that the ban would actually be something along the lines of a 6.1 billion rands retail sales revenue loss. So how badly affected were you in the 2-week ban that we've just seen?
Yeah, look, we've done a lot of research in terms of the losses. For all the bans that we experienced in last year up until the end of January 2021, we lost about 36 billion. And that estimate which you referred to now speaks to our estimate for this period that we currently locked down. If it gets extended beyond this evening, then we're likely to see those numbers climb even further. But the real challenge that we believe our industry will face over the last few weeks, our members have reported at least 4 or 5 incidences in Pretoria, Boksburg, Durban, and Bloemfontein of premises getting robbed and products stolen, either from a storage facility or from a manufacturing facility. We've heard this week about an illegal distillery in Belkom. Now, the illegal trade is operating with impunity, and I don't think the government or the police, our law enforcement, is able to deal with those issues effectively. And so we believe if the legal trade is open, we're the most efficient response to the illicit trade. If we are trading, then at least that pent-up demand is met by the legal trade, which pays excise, because in the absence of legal product in the market, illegal and illicit products will flood the market, and we'll just continue to lose market share to these criminals.
Now, I'm sure a lot of people listening are saying that, well, government wouldn't really want, to close this industry down because of the livelihoods component of this balancing act that they've been trying to do. Surely you understand that the balancing act is quite hard. So what are you proposing to a government in terms of, how they should best address this situation? Because it is, I would imagine, a very hard decision for them.
Yes, Nati, and having watched this insert, I sat and listened to the report from the Undertakers Association, and then followed by the business segment. And yes, we have to balance lives as well as livelihoods, and we by no means think that the government and the president in particular has an easy task. So we've agreed with government. We think that within this time of the pandemic, where numbers are increasing, gatherings should be restricted. So we've proposed that we have limited trade from a Monday to Friday from think it's 9 to 6 is our proposal, and that people be allowed to purchase alcohol, take it and go consume at home responsibly. So we're taking what we call on trade out of the equation. That's where people gather and consume alcohol in a bar or tavern. The restaurants have made different submissions, and the restaurants are a controlled space. There's temperature monitoring, the seats are far apart. In fact, I've been led to believe, and my colleague in the sector tells us that they're even willing to sit outside so that they could trade, because the support is not coming through from government in the form of TERS or UIF. Many people are sitting and starting to fundraise to try and help people in the restaurant sector. And what's happening there is absolute carnage in terms of the economy. And we have to start balancing it. And right now we feel the balance is out of sync. We need to start doing something to save livelihoods, because people who are unemployed, who can't afford to eat properly, are more susceptible to this virus than people who have the luxury of doing so.
These kinds of solutions that you speak of have been proposed in the past, but it also always boils down to the behavior of South Africans. And they've taken the lessons from the first and the second wave. And it's simply that there are such social issues are so deep as it relates to alcohol in this country that people's behavior simply hasn't changed. And what that has resulted in is hospitals that have been filled up. And so the question then is, what is the industry doing from a long-term perspective in terms of trying to address just those social issues that we are dealing with as a country as it relates to alcohol consumption?
Absolutely. As an industry, we are not in denial that some people who consume alcohol, some of our consumers who consume alcohol, do so irresponsibly. There are people who have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, and we have to put programs in place to address that. As industry, over the last 3 years, we've invested 450 million rand in alcohol harm education programs to try and encourage more responsible consumption. We're rolling out now a program ahead of any regulatory interventions to start encouraging everybody to ask for IDs as a method to address underage drinking. So the industry is not oblivious to these challenges. But we don't think these instruments that are being used by government now, such as blanket bans, are effective, because people who abuse alcohol and who drink alcohol irresponsibly will still find ways to access alcohol even during a ban. So, it's the moderate drinkers who get impacted the most by such decisions. And we're saying, let's target those individuals who are dealing with or consuming alcohol irresponsibly, instead of using these blanket bans that impact on people who consume alcohol moderately.
All right, you've indicated that you're very hopeful that this tax deferment that you are requesting from SARS will be granted. If it's not granted, how will your industry survive this one?
The truth, Unati, is that we really didn't want to submit that application. We understand the predicament that this government finds itself in. We need funds to be able to pay for the vaccine rollout. So that was the last thing we wanted to do as an industry, to submit an application for tax deferment. We would rather be trading, we'd rather be making our contribution to the economy. But often when we speak as the alcohol industry, we assume that we're just talking about these large multinationals. That's not the case. I have smaller members who are really struggling to get through this phase, and without those type of deferments being approved, it might sound the death knell for their businesses. Now, we often roll out very big numbers which run into the billions. But, I have a member in the Boland region who's the second largest employer in that little town. I won't mention the name because that's information I think is confidential. But this company is the second largest employer in that little town. When they shut down, and a little town that is already struggling with unemployment is going to be plunged even deeper if that business closes. So, there's just so much you can do when you're starting to juggle a lack of income. You have to, you still have to pay for, your rent. If you are renting, you still have to pay your employees. Government has asked us to pay employees. So somewhere you've got to make some concessions. And we think that the concession should come in the form of tax deferment.
Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa has been confirmed to address the nation at 8 p.m. tonight. What would you like to hear from the president? Of course, this follows the National Coronavirus Council meeting. What do you want President Cyril Ramaphosa to say tonight as it relates to your industry in particular?
Well, we'd dearly love to hear the president say that we'd be allowed to continue trading. And the recommendation we've made is that we should not have on-trade consumption. So people should be allowed to purchase from an off-trade premises, purchase the alcohol, take it home, and enjoy it responsibly, even if it's for limited hours in the week. So that's our request. The taverners are on board, that they will act as click and collect points where consumers go down to their local tavern, purchase their alcohol, take it home and go consume it responsibly. And also hear what the restaurants are calling for. That industry has also been decimated, and we hope that the president has heard our calls. We've been making these calls throughout this week. We've made submissions to NatJoins, who in turn informs the National Command Council, and we're certainly hoping that the president this evening will balance lives as well as livelihoods in our sector.
All right, Mr. Moore, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I really do appreciate it.